Today, I'll share my experience of being kicked out of my boyfriend's place for another girl. It all unfolded when I suggested we open up our relationship. My story might be a bit messy, but I think it's relatable for many people in their 20s. I'm sharing it here to let you all know that messy moments are part of life and you're not alone. I'm a 22-year-old woman and my boyfriend, let's call him Ray, is also 22. We had been in a relationship for over a year. We both graduated from college this year, and our story began during our freshman year when we met at a freshman party. We instantly hit it off and became close friends. While we made other friends too, our bond was special. We spent a lot of time together, attending classes, hanging out, and going back to our dorms as a pair. We were both single at that time. One day I mentioned to Ray that I wanted to have fun during our university years. So we decided to create profiles on dating apps like Bumble and Hinge, which were quite popular among our fellow students for casual dating. We thought we'd give it a try. We continued to remain close friends and started casually dating other people we matched with on these apps. It seemed to be going well, and since we were good friends, we would share our dating experiences with each other. I was content because I wasn't looking for a serious relationship at that point. However, as time went on, I started feeling jealous when my roommate, who had recently started dating, shared her adorable experiences with her boyfriend. It made me envy the companionship they had, even though I had many options on the dating apps. I realized I wanted someone in my life to do all the things couples do. Meeting my dates at the university, hooking up, and parting ways were becoming monotonous and lonely. One night, Ray and I went to a nearby bar, got really drunk, and shared a kiss. I don't recall much, but I remember that night. To avoid making things awkward, I began avoiding him afterward. I kept my distance for about a week until he confronted me after a class. He asked me what was going on, and I confessed that I didn't want our friendship to be strained by what had happened. Ray disagreed with my decision to ignore him and believed it was unnecessary. We decided to have a coffee at the campus cafe to discuss our situation. During our conversation, we talked about the possibility of a relationship. He mentioned that he too had grown tired of the casual hookups and admitted he really liked that night we spent together. He asked if I felt the same way and suggested we give a relationship a chance. Although I enjoyed that night as well, I was hesitant because I didn't want to jeopardize our friendship, especially since I didn't have many friends in college. I requested some time to contemplate Ray's proposal. His words lingered in my thoughts. I came to realize that our friendship would never be the same after that memorable night, which I genuinely enjoyed. Given the circumstances, it seemed fair to give a potential relationship between us a chance. A few days later, I called him and conveyed my readiness to explore something more than friendship. He welcomed the idea. We decided we weren't ready for a serious, committed relationship at that point, so we opted for a friends with benefits arrangement. We continued to see other people occasionally, but remained open and honest with each other from the outset. It felt good to have both a physical and emotional connection with the same person. Beyond the physical aspect, we could engage in regular conversations and share our daily experiences, which was truly comforting. Our history as college friends added to the comfort of our evolving dynamic. Things were going smoothly, and our friends with benefits situation was working well. Ray occasionally surprised me with sweet gestures like getting me flowers. We spent a significant amount of time together, and I started developing feelings for him. During a dinner, he expressed his affection for me, and I was thrilled to realize I felt the same way. We decided to become exclusive, and I readily agreed, having developed a substantial crush on him by that point. That's how we transitioned into dating each other, and I was delighted to have both emotional and physical connections with the same guy. It allowed me to understand the appeal of all the aspects people discussed when in a relationship. Our first date was a painting outing, and our relationship was going well. I was content and happy with him, especially since I had never been in a proper relationship before him. However, despite my initial belief that I was ready for a relationship and had moved on from casual hookups, I began to realize that I wasn't entirely prepared for it. When my boyfriend was occupied with other commitments, I felt the urge to text guys on dating apps and go out with them. While being with the same person was enjoyable initially, It was starting to feel monotonous. I longed for the excitement of meeting new people and engaging in fresh conversations. I confided in one of my friends, who assured me that these feelings were normal. She explained that after being immersed in hookup culture, transitioning to a committed relationship could initially seem dull but offered stability. While I recognized the truth in her words, I remained uncertain about discussing these thoughts with my boyfriend. After all, he had been my friend before becoming my boyfriend, and I hoped he would be understanding and open to finding a solution. During one weekend when my boyfriend was visiting his family and I was staying on campus due to the distance to my own home, I found myself bored and decided to casually scroll through Bumble for some entertainment. I made a firm resolution not to act on my impulses or engage with anyone on the app. As I was about to close the app, a notification popped up. It was a message from a guy I had matched with earlier but hadn't met yet. I checked out his profile and he seemed quite attractive. He asked if I was available to meet him for a coffee that evening. After contemplating it for a moment, I decided to go for it. With nothing else to occupy my time, I figured, what's the worst that could happen? I convinced myself that meeting a guy for coffee wasn't inherently wrong, and I believed we would simply enjoy a coffee together, nothing more. I planned to explain everything to my boyfriend later. However, when I met the guy for coffee, he turned out to be really charming, and he flirted with me throughout our time together. We shared genuine laughter and had a great connection. I couldn't bring myself to return immediately after our coffee. As we walked, I impulsively kissed him, and he reciprocated. He kindly dropped me off at my dorm, and I decided that I would disclose the whole situation to my boyfriend when he returned. I anticipated that, as my friend, he would understand my predicament and help me navigate through it. Our relationship wasn't very serious or committed, so I didn't see a reason for him to be hurt or upset. However, upon my boyfriend's return, he shared how he had excitedly spoken to his friends back home about me, and they were eager to meet me. It seemed like he was taking our relationship seriously. He also mentioned a story about one of his friends who had ended his relationship after his girlfriend kissed another guy. They were friends before dating, and as soon as she kissed someone else, he promptly broke up with her and cut off contact. The resemblance of their situation to ours was uncanny. I inquired about his thoughts regarding his friend's decision, and he expressed complete support, affirming that his friend had done the right thing. This was the opposite of what I had anticipated. I had envisioned a civil conversation in which we would work through our relationship issues. If my boyfriend felt this strongly about his friend's situation, he would likely sever ties with me if I were to confess what had occurred. I realized it was better not to divulge this information while he was away. I didn't want to jeopardize our friendship, and I was uncertain about how he would react to a potential breakup. I wasn't even sure if breaking up was what I truly wanted. Our relationship had been going well, and ending it solely because I was feeling bored didn't seem like a valid reason. I believed I should give things more time before making any impulsive decisions. This period allowed me to reflect and figure out what I genuinely wanted without causing harm. After some time had passed, I realized I had feelings for him, but I didn't want to commit fully, and I wanted to continue exploring other options on the side. I was uncertain about how my boyfriend would react to this revelation, so I chose to keep it to myself, thinking I might just be confused about everything. I decided to go on a few dates with other guys to help me figure out what I truly wanted. Whenever my boyfriend was away from campus, I would often open dating apps, mainly Bumble and Hinge, and go on casual hookups with other guys. I found enjoyment in these encounters, and continued doing so for a while. Then, one fateful Friday, my boyfriend and I had a major argument. He wanted me to accompany him to his home to meet his family and friends, but I felt it was too soon for such a commitment. I wanted to express that I wasn't as serious about him, but I held back, and our disagreement escalated into a heated fight. I retreated to my dorm and turned to Bumble. I matched with a guy and arranged to meet him later that night. My boyfriend messaged me, mentioning he was going home alone and would see me later. I contemplated resolving our issues but decided to wait until he returned. That evening, I waited at a coffee shop for my rendezvous with the other guy. After waiting for about 15 minutes with no sign of him, I sent him a text asking if he was still coming and that I was waiting. Just as I hit send, my boyfriend unexpectedly entered the coffee shop, catching me off guard. He confronted me in an accusatory tone, questioning why I was cheating on him. I was at a loss for words and simply stared at him. I attempted to explain that it wasn't what he thought, but he raised his eyebrows, indicating he knew I was being dishonest. To make matters worse, the guy I was supposed to meet that night walked into the cafe. My boyfriend disclosed that they were friends, and his friend had informed him about the girl he was meeting for a hookup, revealing my picture from Bumble. Realizing I couldn't deceive him any longer, I remained silent and listened to his disappointment. In front of the entire cafe, he declared that he was ending our relationship. I felt deeply upset and embarrassed as the surrounding students observed our public breakup. Afterward, I returned to my dorm and cried profusely, regretting the loss of my friendship amidst the chaos. I began to feel overwhelmed by everything happening around me and decided it was best to take a break from dating. I opted to deactivate my Bumble and Hinge accounts, as these apps were no longer serving me well. I longed for Ray, who was not only my boyfriend, but also my best friend. I would send him texts expressing my remorse for how things had ended between us, hoping for forgiveness and a return to normalcy. The emotional distance between us pained me deeply. He used to wait for me after classes, but now he was deliberately avoiding me. My attempts at conversation were met with silence. He started spending time with his other friends, leaving me feeling alone. However, one day, fate brought us together at a mutual friend's party, and by then, I had indulged in way too many tequila shots. I was heavily intoxicated, and it seemed like he was too. I approached him and hugged him, to which he responded in kind. I confessed that I missed him, and he looked at me and admitted he missed me too, perhaps due to our inebriated state. That night, we shared a kiss and spent the night together. The next morning, I woke up in his place, feeling anxious and unsure of what to do. The bed was empty, so I went downstairs to find him in the kitchen making coffee for both of us. I followed my instincts and hugged him, which initially made him tense, but he soon reciprocated the embrace. We had coffee in silence. I apologized for everything and expressed how much I missed him. He listened silently and then inquired about why I had cheated on him. He genuinely wanted to understand the reasons behind my actions. I decided to share the whole truth, starting from the beginning. I explained my confusion and reluctance to commit to a relationship. Despite genuinely liking him, I confessed that I wasn't inherently a committed person, but didn't want to end things with him either. He listened with a neutral expression, leaving me curious about his thoughts. When I finally asked him, he mentioned he was contemplating our situation and suggested that we could try being friends again. This was sufficient for me. I cherished having him in my life. If friendship was what he was comfortable with, I was on board, understanding that he couldn't simply forget everything that had transpired. We resumed our friendship, and over time he inquired about my dating app usage. I informed him that I had taken a break from it after our breakup. We continued hanging out, occasionally sharing kisses and more, without explicitly defining our relationship. After a few weeks, he forgave me for my past actions and proposed the idea of giving our relationship another chance. I expressed my desire for that, and we started dating once more. But brace yourself, the story doesn't end here. We rekindled our relationship, and I moved into his apartment. Things seemed to be going well, but some days proved to be challenging. I began to feel suffocated and missed spending time with other guys. However, this time, I refrained from making any foolish decisions because I didn't want to jeopardize my relationship with my boyfriend. After a few days, I noticed that my boyfriend's phone was constantly buzzing with text notifications whenever we were together. Curious, I inquired about the texts, and he initially brushed it off as unimportant. It continued happening, though, so I pressed him to be truthful with me. He eventually admitted that it was a girl who had been texting him. He explained that after our breakup, he had started casually seeing this girl, although he considered it nothing more than a fling. However, she had developed feelings for him, and even when we got back together, she persisted in pursuing him, hence the continuous texts. This revelation was new to me, and I couldn't help but ask if he had feelings for her. He didn't deny it, but expressed his affection for me. He appeared confused and mentioned that it might be infatuation on his part. I took some time to process this information, and strangely, I didn't feel hurt or upset. Instead, an idea occurred to me. I suggested that he didn't have to choose between her and me. I proposed the concept of opening up our relationship, allowing us to be together while also exploring other connections on the side. It was a way to have the best of both worlds without making a definitive choice. He needed time to mull it over, and I respected that. After a few days of contemplation, he cautiously agreed, acknowledging that it might be worth a try. We also agreed that if the open relationship didn't work for us, we could return to being exclusive. He met up with the other girl again, and I reactivated Bumble and Hinge, eager to explore this new dynamic. I was excited, as my experience with open relationships had been limited to TV shows and books. I ventured on Bumble dates, knowing they were meant for casual fun rather than anything serious, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. My relationship with my boyfriend wasn't suffering this time around. We were open and honest with each other about our daily experiences. However, we decided not to divulge the details of our activities outside the relationship, as we believed it wouldn't serve any purpose to know all the specifics. I confided in my friends about this arrangement, and while some were supportive, others were critical, labeling our approach as crazy. I defended our choices, pointing out that we were in our early 20s and this was our time to enjoy life. This response seemed to silence the critics. My boyfriend, although initially uncertain, found that this arrangement was actually working in our favor. I agreed with his assessment. Since opening up our relationship, we had fewer arguments and returned to each other with smiles. It was proving to be beneficial for us. While it might seem complicated and messy to those unfamiliar with the concept, it was simply a way for us to discover what we truly wanted. My boyfriend and I discussed the folly of committing to a serious relationship at such a young age. Opening our relationship allowed us to explore various aspects, including physical intimacy. I was content until I noticed that he was frequently staying out for extended periods. Sometimes he returned home very late, well after dinner had gone cold. I refrained from questioning his whereabouts because we both knew the reason. I assumed he was enjoying himself, so I didn't intervene. However, as this behavior continued, it began to bother me. One weekend, he mentioned that he was going out of town with a girl. I couldn't help but inquire about his travel companion, to which he responded with a look of annoyance, as if implying it should be obvious. It didn't sit well with me, but I didn't dwell on it and spent the weekend with another guy. Upon his return, my boyfriend appeared unusually elated, as if he had won the lottery. Unable to contain my curiosity, I asked him what was going on. He acted perplexed and insisted that everything was fine. I didn't believe him for a moment. Something didn't add up. I felt lost and couldn't confide in my friends, who had already cautioned me that the situation might not end well. One day, during a casual dinner with my boyfriend, I inquired about his relationship with the girl. He tensed up, but denied any knowledge of what I was talking about. I questioned him again, emphasizing the importance of complete honesty in our relationship. He hesitated briefly, but then admitted that he was spending more time with the girl he had mentioned earlier. He clarified that their involvement was purely casual, and instead of pursuing various hookups, they were meeting each other regularly. His explanation put my mind at ease, as he was forthright about everything happening. I felt reassured and believed we were on the right track. We had dinner together and went to sleep, focusing on preparing for our upcoming final semester exams. Our post-college plans remained unexplored due to our busy schedules. I primarily studied at the university, while my boyfriend opted to study at home. Consequently, we spent less time together. I continued to see other guys on campus, and I assumed he was still involved with the girl from our previous conversation, which didn't concern me much at the time. One day, my boyfriend texted me, expressing his desire to share something important. I returned home to find him on the couch and inquired about the matter. He asked if I remembered the girl he had mentioned earlier, and I confirmed that I did. He revealed that he had developed feelings for her, and she reciprocated those feelings. I wasn't sure where he was going with this, but I responded calmly, telling him it was okay. I emphasized that there was no rule dictating that we could only have feelings for one person at a time, which seemed to ease his worries. He expressed his gratitude for my understanding. The days that followed were relatively normal. Although my boyfriend spent less time with me, I accepted it because of our hectic schedules. I was deeply engrossed in exams and often returned home late, immediately heading to bed. It was only after several days that I noticed my boyfriend's absence. I inquired about his well-being, and he assured me that everything was fine, alleviating my concerns. At that point, I was involved with a new guy from college who was aware of my open relationship status and comfortable with it. I spent a weekend at his place, not returning home during that time. When I eventually returned home, I was shocked to discover that all my belongings were gone. The apartment no longer contained any of my belongings, which left me in a state of shock. I initially considered the possibility of a robbery, but it seemed absurd, even as I thought it, because it appeared as though someone had purposefully removed only my things. Attempting to contact my boyfriend proved futile, so I patiently awaited his return to the apartment. It took him 2 to 3 hours to finally return home, and I wasted no time in questioning him about the mysterious disappearance of my possessions. On that particular day, he appeared noticeably different in his demeanor, gait, and overall demeanor. Eventually, he disclosed that he had relocated all of my belongings back to my dormitory. I was taken aback by this revelation and immediately inquired why he had taken such a drastic step. I asked him directly if he was kicking me out for someone else. He became tense and hastily explained that I had misconstrued the situation. According to him, his other girlfriend was moving in and I had to return to the dorm. His rationale was that her landlord had evicted her due to financial constraints, and she had no alternative housing. He informed me that he had already coordinated with campus authorities, and since my dorm room was unoccupied, there shouldn't be any issues with me moving back in. However, I voiced my displeasure at his unilateral decision-making process and expressed my wish for him to have discussed it with me beforehand. In response, he embraced me and asserted that he would have discussed it had I answered my phone when he called in the morning. He had already arranged for his friends to help with the move, and the urgency was heightened because the girl needed to vacate her apartment by the end of the day. Feeling embarrassed by the prospect of returning to the dormitory, I conveyed my concerns to him. In turn, he grew frustrated and implied that my embarrassment shouldn't exceed what he felt when I cheated on him, effectively silencing me. Realizing the futility of further argument, I resigned myself to the situation. I returned to campus and my dormitory, which felt strange but was ultimately practical since I needed to focus on studying for my upcoming exams. Over time, my communication with my boyfriend dwindled significantly. Whenever we did speak, he would engage briefly before claiming something urgent had arisen, forcing him to end the conversation. Eventually, he ceased responding to my texts altogether. His behavior began to gnaw at me, and I became increasingly convinced that he was concealing something from me. Determined to address his unusual conduct, I sought to confront him about it. However, he no longer visited campus, as most of our classes had concluded, and everyone was preparing for final exams. One day, I found myself in the company of a guy who inquired about my relationship status with my boyfriend. I responded with a puzzled look since I had previously informed him about our open relationship. He mentioned that he was asking because he had seen my boyfriend at a restaurant with another girl. My reaction was one of indifference, as I casually remarked that my boyfriend had been with other girls before. However, the way he described their interaction raised my suspicions, and I grew weary of the ongoing drama. It was time to confront my boyfriend and suggest putting an end to this open relationship arrangement. Little did I know that I was a bit late in arriving at this decision. That evening, I went to my boyfriend's apartment to have the conversation. He greeted me with a smile, which quickly faded upon seeing me, as though he had expected someone else. Upon entering his apartment, I was taken aback by the significant changes that had occurred in such a short time. It felt as though every trace of me had been meticulously removed. Despite this unsettling atmosphere, I pressed on and conveyed to my boyfriend that we needed to talk. He instructed me to sit on the couch while he fetched some water. It was a stark contrast to how the apartment used to be, where I once felt at home. He returned and took a seat across from me, a deviation from his usual position beside me. Although I found this odd, I had more pressing matters to address. I inquired about his recent avoidance of me, to which he replied that he hadn't intentionally been ignoring me. He had simply been preoccupied with work and hadn't found the time to communicate. Next, I broached the subject of his involvement with the other girl, and he confirmed that she was doing well. When I asked if he still had feelings for her, he nodded in affirmation. My heart sank as I posed the question of whether he liked her more than me, and his prolonged silence weighed heavily on me. I couldn't bear the suspense any longer and suggested that we put an end to the open relationship drama. My boyfriend appeared bewildered by my statement, prompting me to elaborate on the importance of our bond and how we could be truly committed to each other if we left behind the complications. I stressed that we didn't need everything else as long as we had each other. Finally, he began to speak. He revealed that when we first entered into the open relationship, he had hoped I would eventually approach him with the sentiments I had just expressed. He admitted that he had been waiting for me to declare that I truly wanted him and no one else. I listened attentively, realizing that this was our first such conversation. Curious, I asked him why he hadn't shared these feelings earlier. He explained that he wanted me to arrive at this realization on my own. He didn't want to pressure me into ending my involvement with other guys. He wanted me to make that choice independently. I was taken aback by his words, but reassured him that I now understood, albeit belatedly, and was ready to end things with everyone else. I declared that it would be just us in our relationship, with no one else involved. However, he dropped a bombshell by revealing that it was too late for that, because he had fallen in love with someone else. His statement shocked me. Throughout our time together, we had never uttered those 3 words to each other, yet he was now saying them about someone else. I protested, asserting that I was still his girlfriend, but he argued that it no longer mattered because I had willingly sent him into another girl's arms. He went on to explain how being with someone else had made him realize the true value of a relationship. He emphasized that relationships encompassed more than just physical intimacy. They held deeper significance. He also criticized me for seeking physical connections elsewhere. I retorted that he couldn't lay all the blame on me, reminding him that he had consented to the open relationship. He laughed and accused me of being obsessed with hookup culture, implying that I couldn't function without it. His words left me in shock. He continued to berate me, asserting that someone like me could never be in a committed relationship. Eventually, I left his house after our relationship had ended. He explained that his girlfriend would soon be returning home, and he didn't want my presence to dampen her mood. Following that day, I never saw him again and had no desire to do so. Our paths crossed briefly during our exams, but that was during our last semester, for which I was grateful. This was my convoluted and intricate story. I understand that it might seem chaotic, and trust me, I am aware of that. I've decided to take a permanent break from any form of relationship. No dating, no situationships, no friends with benefits. I've closed that chapter of my life for good. Thank you for reading my story this far.